I guess I've got a bunch of questions based on what you've just said, but I daren't ask them right now because if I ask them now, I'm likely to get something thrown at me because I think everybody's itching to try the first whiskey.
So I've got I don't know how people have received their samples. Are they labeled bottles?
No, so what I've done is, in my usual fashion, I've made it very easy and really efficient for everybody to be able to fully understand and follow the lineup.
Why is Gavin shaking his head?
So what I've done is the Henstone Old Dog Corn Liquor is the only sample bottle that is blank. The rest have a symbol on them. Okay. Now, the assumption was that and this is where you will shoot me down probably, is I was thinking we'd probably start.
We don't have a blank.
You don't have a blank. Oh, there might be one that's kind of scribbled out because I made a bit of a mess of one of the symbols.
Is that one?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so obviously I was just mixing it up. That was a test, Rebecca. Becca and Ollie have just passed the test. That's wonderful. Thanks for that. So that one should be blank. And then I made the presumption that that might be the one we start on. So again, Chris.
Completely wrong, Carl.
Completely wrong. Great. What would you recommend? Or what was the one you would start with?
Right. So I've got a playlist for us, and I hope it works. So I would like everybody to open the 5-year-old first.
Right. Okay. So that's the. No, is that? So that's the cross, the kiss. And it's this bottle here.
Cross, Carl.
The cross, yeah.
Or a kiss if you'd like it, Dennis.
Yeah, a kiss.
Just to gloat
Well, I've got both. I've got a cross and a tick.
Oh my word.
A kiss, Dennis.
Kiss.
By the way, I prediction that would be the best dram, Carl.
Well done to you. Float in mine.
Which glass did you use? Because one of the glasses on the table had water in it.
Don't know. What's that anyway? I think that's fine.
Just mention any of your glasses have got water in rather than anything in it.
So the 5-year-old.
Have we all got it? Have we all got a 5-year-old in our glass?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good lads and lasses.
Lovely nose to it.
So the 5-year-old. So yeah, I mean we've only been producing whiskey since November 2017. So this was a cask we laid down in 2018, and we managed to keep it back. You know, I mean we're small, we're self-financed, so you know holding casks back when they can go to market is quite an expensive thing for us to do, but we did hold this one back, and I'm very pleased we did. This is bottled at 46%. What you'll learn about me as we go through this tasting as well is I do not give tasting notes. I decided quite a few years ago when I was doing tours of the distillery that it tends to focus people too much on what I'm saying as opposed to you enjoying it. And so if you want to share what you're getting amongst yourselves, I'm perfectly happy for that to be the case, but I'm not going to lead. So yeah, just over 5 years old. It's an ex-bourbon cask. Now, for those of you who've looked at our website, I've actually created a page that describes each of our whiskey releases in detail. So it says when the wash was made, when the distillations took place, you know, how many distillations there were, when it went into wood, what ABV it went into wood at, etc. And normally I actually say what cask type it was over and above ex-bourbon, i.e. ex-bourbon Heaven Hill or ex-bourbon Jim Beam. Now, in the early days of our warehouse, which is actually a shipping container even at the existing site. So in the early days, my wife Alex was painting our logo on the butts of the casks. And so I thought, well, we don't want the original brand on here. So I turned some of them round. And so most of them we can actually identify, but this particular cask, we've no idea what it is.
All right.
Now I've got a hunch it's Jim Beam, but I may be wrong. And fairly soon we're going to have to move all our casks to the new site anyway. And at that stage, I will find out. But it's quite fascinating that it's one that we don't know the original.
So a lot of the distilleries don't necessarily care that much about being that transparent about the bourbon barrels that they use.
Yeah.
Have you found that there's a difference when you've tasted and compared?
There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Every one of our releases is single cask as well. And there's a huge difference, a huge variance. In fact, there's the whiskey exchange, actually. I hope nobody works for the whiskey exchange, but they refuse to stock us because there might be variation in each of our releases. And I think, well, that's a bit bizarre.
It is.
Because if you buy wine from a particular vineyard, then every vintage is going to be different because there's different seasons and stuff like that. And so anyway, that's their call. And if that's the way they think, then I'd prefer not to do business.
So I do believe Whiskey Exchange do actually stock single cask expressions of whiskey.
I believe they do as well, Carl. So I think it's just a strange excuse, to be honest.
Yeah, very. So it just out of interest, do you have a favorite then from the when you said that there is quite a difference?
So yes. So at the moment, from a cask perspective, my favorite is the Heaven Hill.
It burns on the nose.
It certainly seems to produce an amazing end result. That said, I've actually sold 5 casks to a Scottish independent bottler, and they took some of my new make up to Scotland and had it professionally nosed and tasted, and then they selected cask types and sourced the casks for their whiskey, their 5 casks, and they had been recommended to use Buffalo Trace, so I immediately bought a couple of those in as well. And thought I should try some of that. Now, I have not experienced the end result of that yet, so I can't tell you whether I prefer that over the Heaven Hill. But
so what's everybody thinking about the 5-year-old then?
Andy, the ABV is 46. I can see a comment down there, Carl.
Yeah.
What is everybody's view?
I'll pick on people if no one comes forward.
Carl, I'm getting a sort of a gin. I got a gin sort of note on the nose and slightly on the palate as well, which I don't mind. But I know
it's interesting. There's a few people say that, Dave, and it's a really, really bizarre one, because what a lot of other people pick up is a lot of pine. Right, and I wonder whether it is that actual pine note that's coming through, because many other people don't pick up any gin at all. And I can be at whiskey shows, and I can have 2 people standing side by side, and one will say what you're saying and picking up, and the other will say that they don't get it at all. And again, this is the difference that we all have with our olfactory, our sense of smell and our palate. Everybody's is different. And it really is dependent also on what you've eaten and drunk throughout the day, how you're feeling, whether you're stressed or not. All those things influence it as well, don't they?
Anybody else want to dive in with their view on this? Oh, go on, Andy.
So I don't get a lot from the nose, to be honest with you. I just swore it was a higher ABV on the nose than 46, to be fair. I don't dislike it. I don't get gin. I get like a quite a sweet floral note from it. But it's really delicious, I've got to say. I'm very sort of bourbon cask biased.
Right.
And that is everything I want from a bourbon cask whiskey to me. It's really light, very sweet, syrupy as well. A massive contrast to the nose to me. It is
surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And you know, Andy, one of the when I set off on the whiskey producing journey, I sort of thought, you know, what sort of whiskey did I want to produce, and I wanted something that was approachable, relatively easy drinking. You know, doesn't matter really the time of day or day of year. Doesn't really matter your mood. You know, those sorts of things. And when my mind was thinking that through, where it took me was to the sort of light Speyside types of whiskey, and that was subconsciously, if you like, the sort of objective. Now, whether we could ever get there was, you know, anybody's guess in the early days, but I don't think we're a million miles away.
I'm finding that it's extremely drinkable, and the 46. I mean, I tend to drink cask strength.
Yep.
Pretty much all of the time, and that's just because I feel I get more from the flavor and things. But actually, the 46% is remarkably sort of palatable. You know, like even for me, I'm used to drinking cask strength. It feels a bit heavier than 46%, and it's quite balanced. You know, the ABV, there is a tiny little bit of a kick for me, which is good, but it's not overwhelming. It's, you know, it is very easy drinker. And I guess, like you were saying, and like Andy mentioned, you know, it is a classic bourbon sort of Scotch whiskey. There's no doubt about it. And it is very sort of, like I say, it's just very easy to drink. This is worryingly easy to drink, in fact.
It's been termed actually, our normal ex-bourbon is actually 43.8% as opposed to 46. So our normal, if you like, run-of-the-mill whiskey, pardon me, and it's been described by many people as dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think this one is equally dangerous because it is just so quaffable, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm finding I'm sipping it a bit faster than I would normally sip whiskey. So
mine's gone.
So Garson, what do you think of it? And thanks for joining us, Garson. It's been a while since I think you joined one of the virtuals.
It's only because it's free, Carl. No, listen, Chris, it's nice to meet you.
And you,
Steve, and Carl, and a lot of the Neoas people I know have been trying to get me into Henstone for a couple of years now, and I was pretty scared of it because when you're talking about approachable, I was getting that gin thing in the nose, so I must admit I disregarded it. But in the last sort of 18 months or so, I've sought out quite a lot of old blended Scotch whiskies.
Oh yeah,
and that reminds me of an older blended whiskey, and it reminds me of I don't know if you've had B&J, Bailey Nickel Jarvey.
Yeah,
so it's an old Scotch whiskey, blended whiskey. I don't know how much grain's in it, but there's certainly a proportion of grain. But I think that tastes to me like an older, classical blended Scotch whiskey, which I actually really enjoy. So yeah, I like that.
Interesting. So production-wise, probably most won't know this, but we decided not to follow the traditional Scottish way of distilling whiskey with 2 pot stills back to back. So the low wines and then the spirit still. So we've actually got a pot column hybrid configuration, which we can use in England and still call it single malt whiskey, whereas in Scotland, people are not allowed to do that. So we've got a 1,000 litre pot and then a 4-plate column next to it. And then on top of the column, we've got a thing called a dephlegmator, which we can control the temperature of as well, which means that one run through the still from the 1,000 litres of wash in the pot to the actual spirit coming out at the spirit receiver at the end is the sort of equivalent of 5 or 6 distillations, but in one go. And the spirit we get off is in the region of, and it does vary distillation by distillation, and that's why I say it's in the region of, but it's somewhere between sort of the 84% and 91.
Bloody hell.
Really coming off at that sort of strength. And you know, maybe this is another one of those influencing factors that brings out this piney smell, or maybe the ginny smell as well. But that is one of the things we do. And it's quite interesting, actually, because I'm a board member of the English Whisky Guild, which is like the Scottish Whisky Association equivalent. I got involved in that because I was getting a bit worried that the English Whisky Guild was going to say that everybody has to follow the same rules as Scotland in order to call their English whiskey single malt in England. So I got involved in the English Whisky Guild and actually managed to get the people around the table there. I think there's something like 12 board members now, most of them from the, you know, the bigger English distilleries like the Lakes and the Cotswolds and the English, you know, those sorts of places, which have all followed the Scottish way of producing whiskey. And I was really worried they were going to change the rules, you know, make the rules such that I couldn't call ours whiskey or a single malt whiskey. And I got them to vote actually around the table, and they agreed with me that Henstone can continue to call its whiskey English single malt whiskey, even though we create it in the pot column hybrid configuration.
Well,
So
I mean, essentially, the single malt is meant to be single distillery, single origin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And primarily made from malted barley. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But in Scotland, you see, it has to be this two still configuration.
Yeah.
That is one of
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but the
regulations.
the biggest distinction was this whole idea of single malt being a single point of origin, and yeah, anyway.
Yes,
it sounds like you won the argument anyway, so that's good.
Absolutely, certainly for the time being, and I'm staying in the English Whisky Guild for as long as they'll have me, just to make sure that I can continue to win the argument, because it's better to fight from within than from the outside, isn't it? You know, that's what I've always found anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, has anybody else got any more comments on the first dram of the evening, which should have been the corn liquor, obviously.
Carl, stop it. You're going to confuse everybody.
I'm going to confuse everything. Any other comments on the 5-year-old?
It's nice.
I think that's summing up most people's view, although we're going to find out in a second with the old thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down as to just how many people genuinely like it. Price, yes, I was going to ask actually, Chris, what is the RRP on the 5-year-old?
Okay, so for the 5-year-old, it's actually the most expensive in our range because it cost us a lot to hold the cask back. So the RRP is 85, but I'll put this in now because otherwise, Carl, I might forget. So I've created a discount code for all of the people within Newas, and it doesn't matter whether they're on the call tonight, Carl, you can share this with them afterwards as well. Okay. But there's a 10% off code.
All right.
And it's Newas, so NEWAS 10.
10, yeah, nice and easy. All right, well, that's much appreciated. Thank you.
That's okay.
Always helps. I've just put it on the chat anyway, just to make sure, and that'll remind me to put up a post as well on the group. So thanks for that.
That's perfectly okay, and that's valid till the end of March. But if you want it, Carl, if you want it to go beyond the end of March, then just drop me a line and I can push it out a little bit further.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, we love our discount codes. Good. Great stuff. Right. So shall we do the vote then? So if you like it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down. And then whatever in between you might like to choose. What are we thinking?
Okay. I can see one sideways. Oh, I can see two sideways.
Yeah. Oh, and
3.
Steve and John. Okay. So Chris, I know you've not been on one of our virtuals before, but I tend to like to go with the people who are not following the kind of the herd, let's say. Yep. So I'm going to pick on those that actually didn't put the thumbs up, because I think the vast majority did. But Steve, come on, Steve Sharp. Sorry, Steve, give us what was your view on it?
Yeah,
you didn't do a thumbs down, so.
No, I think I would need more time with it. I think, and kind of, it would be a whiskey that I'd want to probably try a few more times. But Yeah, I just didn't get a lot from it. All the same kind of taste notes that were already mentioned. So quite floral. I didn't get much sweetness. For me, it was just very dry and like bitter. And then I got a bit of kind of spice towards kind of the finish, but it just didn't really suit my particular palate. That's all. But it's not a thumbs down because I didn't dislike it, but
Yeah.
it wasn't enough to be a thumbs up. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Thanks, Steve. So, John, Mr. Hill, what was your view on this? Because you were also a thumbs sideways on this.
Well, pretty much exactly the same as what Steve said. I mean, I put it in my tasting notes. First nose, I got gin, probably a bit like Garson. So I think that sort of put me off it straight away. But like I say, it's not a sink pour. It's not an out and out no. It's disgusting. I don't like it. It's just I think I probably would need a little bit more time with it. Whether I'd come round or not, I don't know. From the initial nose, but it's just the way it is. That's the way my palate is.
Yeah,
it's perfect. John, be honest. It's honesty is the best policy. My parents used to say, and you know, everybody has their likes and dislikes, don't they? You know, so it's perfectly.
We like to be we like to pick on those that, like I say, just like to voice their views on it that often isn't with everybody else's. So and you'll definitely find that no one's going to be quiet. So that's grand. All right, grand. I think the only other person who had a thumb sideways was you, Dennis. What were you in the same sort of category on that?
It's a bit too grassy for my liking, too green.
Green grass sort of thing, yeah.
Fresh cut grass.
Yeah.
That's what
I really like that in a whiskey.
But
it is. Yeah, it is.
There was a little bit hazelnut. Was a bit at the end, a bit nutty, but I wouldn't say it would be my go-to whiskey. It's not bad whiskey, but it's not up there, if you know what I mean.
Did anybody absolutely, just to level things out a bit, did anybody absolutely adore this whiskey? Because I think Andy did. Andy, you were fairly positive about this. Well, very positive about it. Anybody else really love the whiskey? Just, you know, definite thumbs up, but you didn't necessarily. Oh, go on, Becca.
I really liked it. I think it was really nicely balanced. There is a hint of so me and Ollie were discussing this on the nose. There's this. Ollie finds it a bit herbaceous, or like a little bit like clove, but also there's like this florality coming through on it, which I think is the thing that possibly is a bit like the gin smell, because there's this botanicalness to it.
Yeah.
I find that I get that with rye whiskies a lot, but I really don't like rye whiskies, but I find that it was in the background of this one, not in the foreground, and so that's then what made it a bit more balanced for me. So I really enjoyed it. It was different to the sort of normal whiskies that I would drink, if you see what I mean. Just the flavour profile is very different.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I like it. It's just because it's so very different on the nose, and then so quaffable in the glass. When you actually sort of taste it, it's bang on like a kind of floral space cider type flavour for sure. Nice and light. Good summer whiskey, if there is such a thing.
to bring in the spring on. Yeah. Hi, Albert. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, folks. Apologies, Carl, and to everyone. We just got held up at Lynette's mum and dad's. They're fairly elderly, and sometimes you don't get away from them when you think you're going to get away from them for various reasons. So apologies for the late joining.
Oh, no worries, Albert. We've all been sitting waiting for you. we haven't had any of the whiskey or anything. We've all been sat here waiting for you, Albert. No, we started on the Kiss the Cross sample, which is the 5-year-old, just so that you know if you want to catch up, because we're about to start on the second one. So Chris, what would you recommend in the second of the lineup?
Okay, so can I just say a couple of words before I say what the second one is?
Yes, yeah.
So I was really chuffed, you know, to meet, well, Stephen Laidlaw first, and then Carl. And Stephen introduced me to Carl at the Southport Whiskey Festival, probably, I don't know, last summer, possibly something like that. But so one of the reasons that I was really chuffed to meet you and to actually then be invited to a virtual tasting with Newers is that back in 1979, I actually went to Newcastle Polytechnic and did a degree in physical electronics. So I was in student accommodation at the Poly at the time, and then moved out in the first year. So in 1980, moved out of student accommodation into the Chillingham Road.
Wow. Well,
how about that, eh?
All the locals definitely know about Chilly Road.
Don't
but
they?
I have to say, Chris, just
sure they would.
But just so that you know, probably I would say over half of the people in the virtual tasting aren't even from the Northeast, or at least there might be a very tenuous link.
I had sort of guessed that, Carl, by some of the accents, but I thought I'd put it in there anyway because of the name of the group.
Well, because it's surprising, a lot of people from Northeast Scotland, Northeast United States, Northeast wherever the hell have joined Newcastle over the years. Yeah. So yeah, but I know you told me when we first met that you'd been up to Newcastle and stuff and stayed up here. So I'm glad they treated you well.
They did. So I graduated in 1982 and I haven't been back since. So I'm waiting the invitation, Carl.
Well, you need to come to the festival or something. That's what you need to do.
Absolutely. Certainly do.
Grand. So what would you recommend as the next one in the lineup?
Dram number 2, we're going to go for the Ex Oloroso.
Right. So the Ex Oloroso is the love heart. So your sample bottle that has my pathetic attempt to create a heart shape on your sample is the Ex Oloroso cask.
Carl, your drawing skills are getting worse.
That is really bad, Chris.
Oh, that is terrible.
Looks a bit like an
You think yours was bad? Look at that one. I tell you what, didn't send me a Valentine's card. No.
It's just as well he doesn't make my Valentine's card himself, isn't it?
Mine looks like a drunk whale, I'm going to be honest.
I thought it was a deflated Pac-Man.
Yes, that as well.
I think people's drawing notes are as good as the tasting notes.
I must have gotten one of his better bottles.
Oh, there you go. That looks exactly like a love heart. Right.
So this particular whiskey had around 3 years in ex-bourbon, and then has had about 12 months in an Ex Oloroso quarter cask. So there's only about, it's bottled at 46% again, and there are only about 160 odd bottles of this because of the size of the cask. Quarter cask, by the way, is 125 litres.
It's undeniably Oloroso on the nose, isn't it?
Can I ask you, Chris, just while we're contemplating this?
Go ahead.
Your distillation.
Yep.
Is it a one-time distillation, so it goes through the pot still straight into the column still?
Correct.
Right.
Yep. I found, and you know, I'm completely honest and open, Garson, and if you came and had a look, I would show you exactly what we do. But I actually, when I'm distilling whiskey, I do it on full reflux as well. So the plate, essentially the plate's down, which is doing the maximum amount of cleaning of the spirit. And I found that results in what I really like as a new make spirit. It's really light, it's fruity, you know. And, you know, as I was saying earlier, obviously the Scottish independent bottler who had it professionally nosed thinks the same as well. I was actually cacking it when they said that they were going to take it up to Scotland and have it nosed professionally, because it's a husband and wife team in this independent bottling company, and she was the head of the Scottish Whisky Association for more than 10 years. So I was a mite concerned.
Trying to think of who that narrows the indie bottler down to.
I thought you might be thinking, Carl. I don't think they've actually, I'm not allowed to, I don't think I'm allowed to tell you, but normally by saying what I've said so far, you can do a tiny bit of Googling and find out, but I don't think they've actually released anything as yet. So I think it's more about putting it down and letting it mature for a while.
So initially I thought that smelled a bit like nail varnish, but now all I get is pear drops.
Cream soda.
And then I get creaminess on the end.
So I'm curious what the Wilkinsons think of this.
Why are you curious, Carl?
First one's better.
Oh,
You like the 5-year-old?
no, I just thought these guys might have preferred this one over the first one.
Sherry finish normally, but I prefer the first one to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so does Maxine.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, I'm the opposite. I like this one a lot better than the first one.
So much for taste.
And it certainly punches above its weight for being a 46. It feels more like a 53.
Thank you,
I'd say
Dennis.
it feels bigger than the first one as well.
It feels thicker on the palate, this one, doesn't it? I think, yeah, I agree with that. I wouldn't have guessed it was 46%.
Tasty.
Oh, annoyingly, I think this one's nicer on the nose than the first one. Let me go back on that. Slightly more interesting on the nose. I can absolutely smell the first one through this. So obviously the spirit profile's coming through.
Yeah.
But the Oloroso just adds a little bit more of sort of depth and breadth to it.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of sherry casks these days. Steve showed me the way. All right, Steve. But that's absolutely delicious as well. I would not have thought that such a light spirit would take to Oloroso as well as that does. It's really nice.
So Chris, when you were deciding when to bottle this, did you find that you think you got the sweet spot in terms of you didn't want it to become too sherried?
Yeah, so lots of people say so. I don't know if any of you follow the Lakes Distillery at all, and when the Indian chap that they had, I can't remember his name now, who was doing all of the cask analysis, and they were very proudly saying that he knew intimately every cask and the flavor and the nose profile of every cask. And people often question me about this. I mean, we've got significantly less volume of casks than they have, but my view is that we don't open them. We don't open them until we think we want to use them. And the reason for that is that when we fill the casks, you never fill right to the very top, to the bung, because if it's a cold day and then the whiskey expands, it's going to pop the bung out and you're going to get leakage and all that sort of stuff. So we always fill slightly lower. And actually the technical way we do this is I stick my second finger through the bung hole and wiggle it. And when I feel the spirit touch my finger, that's when we stop, because that actually works. And we have this nice little air gap at the top. And the reason we do that is because we build we store the whiskey in containers. Stephen, you've seen this, haven't you? You've seen our containers. And we have to physically lift them onto the frames that we've built. So if they were full, we've got no chance of getting them in there. So we have to fill in situ. And it's just a way that we've done this. And so it leaves an air gap of probably about this sort of depth in a 200-litre cask, which isn't a great deal when you consider the curvature of the cask itself as well. And then you put the bung in. Now, immediately what happens is the spirit is pushing the oxygen, the hydrogen, the air out of the cask. So my theory is that the last thing you want to do is pop the bung, let all the air back in, and then put the bung back in, because that's that's going to start oxidizing the spirit in there, in my humble opinion. And so we tend to try to avoid opening them as much as we possibly can. If we're getting to the point, this one as an example, we did try it, I think, about 2 months before. This is in the sherry cask, so I think we tried it about 2 months before we actually decided to bottle it. And we decided to hold back because we thought it just needed a tiny bit more. And I think those 2 months actually did it.
Another difference between England and Scotland, Chris, is that we're not allowed to finger the bunghole up here.
Yeah.
And so I apologise. I know we're only 2 drams in. That's me finished. Sorry.
Garson, you could have waited till we were 5 in to say that.
Well, I'm not sure where we go from there.
No, I'm not entirely sure either, Carl. I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Listen, just to caveat that, I definitely have enjoyed the first 2 drams, and I definitely think there's something old school about this whiskey. And as I say, I've got about maybe 15, 20 bottles of old blends, and I keep on seeing them pretty cheap because nobody's looking for them.
Yeah.
Superior Strength, B&J, old Johnny Walkers, things like that. And it does feel like an older, more established dram. It's credit to yourself, Chris.
Thank you very much, Garson.
Garson, how old are we talking about these? Are we talking like 80s or earlier, or?
Yeah, I've got some stuff from, well, the distillates go back to just after the war, some of them. And some of the styles, like for example, Johnny Walker did a celebratory blend, which was meant to be back to the sort of late Victorian era. But I have got some bottles there. I've got a QE2 pack that was available on the ship in 1977, and allegedly some of the grain whiskey might have been pre-war in that. But there definitely is if anybody sees old bottles of Johnny Walker, for example, or Bailey Nickel Jarvey from the, sold in the 80s, but probably distilled in the 60s, 70s, they're worth seeking out because there's some fantastic whiskies out there. Old Glen Grant. Yeah, I've got quite a few of them. I've just bought an Usher's, and we had some Usher's Green Stripe, and the liquid in that was definitely pre-Second World War, and they're just fantastic, layered. Everything seems to be dialed back. There's nothing really pops out yet. It's just an amazing type of whiskey, I think.
I've got an old 70s Dimple, which is, I hadn't made that connection that you have, and I still can't necessarily see that, but probably because I haven't had as many of those old sort of blends. But that old Dimple shoots above its weight. There's no doubt about it. It is a really nice whiskey, and I think I got it off an auction for peanuts. It was like, I think the actual hammer price was something like £12.50 or something for this bottle. So it's incredible some of the stuff you could get. I think it's creeping up a little. I think there is a little bit more interest in these old blends, but you can still get them for a song.
I think that the problem is that the word's getting out there. There's a lot of malt in these old blends, because obviously single malts weren't really popular. So there is a lot of cracking older whiskies out there.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I wouldn't say I'm massively familiar with the rules and the legislation of what constitutes single malt and stuff like that, other than a fairly standard understanding of it. But you do wonder, or I do wonder, when that stuff was enforced. And if you go back long enough, maybe the reason this is reminiscent of those older blends is because they were using similar techniques because they were able to back then, that sort of thing. And maybe you can actually get more flavor out of it. I remember when I started drinking whiskey and when I first started reading up on it, everything said that sort of blends were more popular because they were more consistent and more flavorful than single malts were back in the day. That's why blending was a thing, effectively.
I've heard that certainly in the 1980s, just as single malts were tipping over and it being popular, a lot of distilleries who weren't consistent with their malt, they were the ones that got mothballed and went to the wall. And the more consistent malts, they survived. Because obviously everybody asked, why did this distillery close? Why did that one close?
And now we celebrate the sort
diversity.
of, yeah, like Springbank and Kilkerran and stuff like that, where there's a lot of differences in each batch and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's funny how things go around like that.
Mm-hmm. So to drag it back to the to what we were on the lineup, that's what's everybody thinking of the Oloroso then?
Okay.
Oh, we do it. We'll do that. We'll do the old.
We're doing the thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay.
What was the price on that one, Chris? Sorry, I missed the price. I don't know if it was mentioned.
No, it wasn't mentioned. Right, I've got I think it's $59.95. And then remember, you got your 10% discount on that too.
That's
This
key
is good.
price.
I like the first two bottles.
Yeah.
Get expensive.
That's a really good deal.
Yeah.
You say that was one of 100 and something bottles?
Yeah, about 100. Hold on, I can tell you if I can work out how to get my mouse to go to the other screen.
What one's that? What's that one called?
It's the Ex Oloroso.
So I don't know if you can kind of.
Too far away from the camera.
Yeah, I'm probably too far away, but.
You've put some nice pictures up on the Facebook page, Carl.
Oh yeah. There's some pictures on there. Mine's got a bit of my own artwork on the heart. What's left?
What I really liked about this one, which is what someone else commented on earlier, was that that florality carries through from the first one to the second one. So that floral hit, the Oloroso hasn't masked that. That's obviously a distillery identity there. And I really enjoyed that, isn't it? I think you're finding also a little bit herbaceous.
Yeah, a little bit of grassy notes coming through on the nose now. Do we know which bodega it is? The Oloroso?
No, I don't know. So I get all my casks via Speyside cooperage, and unfortunately, no, they're not. I can't get that level of detail. I can't get that level of detail for the sherry casks. If we'll go on to it later, but Scottish distillery casks, I'm not allowed to know which distillery the Scottish ones have come from either. I'm just looking in our online shop, which I used to manage, and I don't know, but I can't see the Oloroso in there. So I will make sure that's in there early next week if anybody's interested in a bottle of that.
Do you also have stockists in some of the indie retailers or anything? Or
Yeah, some of the indies. We're also stocked in Master of Malt as well.
Right.
But what I try to do is make sure our entire range is on our website, because with some of the releases, they're very, very small indeed, and you simply can't get them around the other places. But House of Malt,
and it's better to buy direct from you if we can.
If you can, that's right.
Great.
You got a core range, Chris?
The core range, essentially, what we're trying to do with the core range is our single malt ex-bourbon matured, but at the 43.8%, so not the 5-year-old. So it will generally be in the 3 to sort of 4-year age bracket. So that's the one that we specifically try to keep going all the time. We're also trying to keep the Oloroso in the Ex Oloroso in stock all the time. We're going to come to a couple of the others later, but we're trying to keep our ex-peated as an offering most of the time as well. But as you can imagine, you know, with a small distillery like us, we open one cask. If we've got only 160, 170 bottles out of that cask, then you only have got to go to one or two independent outlets, and all of a sudden the stock levels come down, and you know, you haven't got that many left at all. So it can be quite tricky to manage that core range. But I mean, ultimately it's around our single malt ex-bourbon cask matured, and then we try to keep a few in there as well.
And what are you filling the casks at, ABV wise?
This all on our website again at 65.4%.
Right. And so you're losing quite a lot then, because that 120 odd bottles doesn't seem a lot.
No. So the Ex Oloroso was matured in a quarter cask, so they're only 125 litres, and we get about 160 bottles out of that then at 46%. So it's actually not that bad at all.
Okay.
We're not actually. I mean, I've simply not had time to do the real in-depth analysis on what our losses are, but I really don't think they're as big as people assume they would be as we're keeping them in shipping containers, you know. So
okay,
takes a lot of time to do this sort of analysis, you know. And when you've been through the mill like I have over the past few months, that's sort of not at the top of the priority list.
So I just remembered that I had a couple of questions around, you know, when you were saying how you got your first equipment, your 1,000 litre still, for example. I was just curious where you got all the equipment. Did you end up sort of searching around eBay and stuff like that? I mean, or did you get
I mean, I did start on eBay. I will be completely honest with you, but I mean, that was more when I was trying to convince the others to come into business with me, and I was thinking we could do something, you know, in a shed in the garage or whatever, you know. But ultimately, the Hilda, as she's called, the 1,000 litre, she came from South Germany, so near Stuttgart. There's a sort of, it's probably a village actually in our terminology, called Eislingen, and it's a company called Cote that produced the still for us, and she was brought up from southern Germany and delivered to us. So she was custom built.
All right.
We went for, in the accommodation we had, or currently have for not much longer, she was built essentially to fit into that accommodation. And it's quite interesting now because, as I mentioned, you know, we're building this modular based distillery out of shipping containers, and we've got to double stack one area of them so that we can create the height that we need in order to fit Hilda in.
Excellent. All right.
There you go.
What is the next one in the lineup?
So the next one in the lineup is the.
Can I just ask a question, please?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
What made you decide to the fill level at 65.4 rather than the general sort of rule of thumb of 63.5?
It's a very, very good question, John. And do you know, in the early days, I sort of just went with a number which was, I decided to go a little bit higher on the basis that I didn't really know what the impact of storing them in shipping containers would be. So that was part of my logic in the very, very early days, John. And so I did, in the very early days, I did move a little bit. And if you do go onto the page that's about whiskey releases on our website and have a look, you can actually see there was a tiny bit of difference between a few of them. And then I got to this point, it's about tasting the new make itself as well when you've liquored it back, so diluted it to cask strength. And I was just absolutely loving it at this 65.4 and decided to stick at it. And, you know, it's one of those things of, you know, if it isn't broken, don't try and fix it. And so I've stuck with that, and it seems to work. You know, I'm perfectly happy with it. I don't think our losses are too great. I think we're pulling out the right amount with with ex-bourbon casks. They're based on new American oak, or based on American oak. So bourbon producers have to put bourbon into new American oak, the virgin wood, and that's why the Scottish industry latched on years ago that they should use ex-bourbon casks. It was a lot cheaper than producing them from European oak. Now, American oak is very high in natural vanilla and low in natural tannin. The higher ABV you go in at, the more likely you're to pull some of the tannin out of the wood as well. And that was the other thing I wanted. I didn't want to overly sweeten the whiskey based on the vanilla in the wood. I wanted to pull a bit of the tannin out as well. It was sort of my logic, you know. I studied physical electronics at Newcastle Poly. I spent 40 years in telecoms and IT. I knew sweet FA about this, but my logic was telling me that this sort of stood up. You know, I'd read loads as well. I'd read loads of books about aging and all of this sort of stuff and the different woods and, you know, what you should do. And I just didn't want to follow everybody else either, John. You know, it's one of those opportunities to sort of think, if I do this, I wonder what will happen. And
good enough reason as any, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
It seems to work, I think. So, I mean, one of my other things is about all of our products, because we do produce gin, we produce rum, we produce vodka, we produce brandies, is that I don't put anything out that I don't like. And because if you don't like it, it's really hard to sell, I think. And, you know, if I like it, I hope then the passion that I've got behind it comes through, and, you know, and then people will buy it if they like it. And I'm not saying that they should like it just because I do either, because that's another very, very different conversation, isn't it? So drum number 3, Carl.
Yes.
Ex-red wine cask.
Right.
Little smiley face.
Yeah. Smiley face on your sample.
Smiley face on your sample, people.
I want to know how many people's looks like a smiley face.
Oh, we're going to go down that route again.
I've got a gurner.
I've got 3 on mine.
Three smiley faces. He was obviously just making sure, Derek, that it's for you.
Dear me. So I can do smiley faces better than I can do other things then.
Love hearts or upside down wheels.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Hey, they're picking on you tonight, Carl.
He can handle it.
Doesn't usually happen.
So ex-red wine cask matured. Now this is out of, so I don't want to give the whole story away. So we've had 2 whiskies. This is the 3rd whiskey. So out of the 3 whiskies we've had so far, this is the youngest. That's the first thing I'll say. Second thing I'll say, probably shouldn't have told you that. Second thing I'll say is that it is 100% matured in ex-red wine cask, and the ex-red wine cask is Southern Hemisphere. It's actually a Penfold Grange.
That's Aussie, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Now, we're not allowed to write that on the label because Penfold Grange didn't want us to. So if I don't know if any of you saw somebody asked me on X, that used to be known as Twitter. You have to say that after every time you say X, don't you? Somebody asked me about it, and I said, well, the only hint I could give you is that if you've read Ian Banks's book, Raw Spirit, when he traveled around Scotland visiting distilleries, the only hotels he would stay in, because he was on expenses, were those that sold Penfold Grange red wine, because he absolutely loved it. And we managed to get our hands on, I think, about 10 casks actually of these. And so this is actually 3 years and 1 day, because we wanted to get this out just before Christmas. And the other reason it's 3 years and 1 day is that am I allowed to mention other whiskey clubs, Carl, or do I get immediately
absolutely
muted?
Well, most people on here are on at least 2 or 3 of them.
So the Birmingham Whiskey Club Amy at Grain and Glass got in touch with me in about October of last year and said, Chris, we give our cask strength members a cask strength bottle every Christmas, and have you got anything you could use? And my son Henry's my sales manager, and he and I had a chat, and we thought, let's go out and have a taste of that red wine cask. And it was just under 3 years at the time we tasted it, and we at cask strength we tasted it, and we thought, yes, we think Amy will like this. Pardon me, we sent her a sample. She absolutely loved it. And so they had 40 bottles of this at cask strength. So we took it out of the cask. We put 40 bottles into bottles for her. And then the rest we diluted down to, again, 46%, this one.
That's lovely. Did you not keep any at cask strength for yourself?
I might have a bottle.
Because I bet that's good at cask strength.
It's very good at 46%.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm enjoying this. I think this is possibly just leapt into first place for me.
I'd agree.
Sometimes I can be a fanny, as probably Steve Laidlaw will let everybody know. I can be a bit of a fanny, but I am, one of the things I always say is, why do people dilute their whiskey down and sell it? But that, I think, is perfect, especially for a 3-year-old whiskey.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I shouldn't have told you it was 3 years old. As soon as I said that, I thought I should have held that back, but it doesn't matter, does it?
No,
it
doesn't
feels
matter.
older. It definitely feels older than 3 years.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It just doesn't matter though. When it's something that's as well executed as that, I don't think it matters.
Yeah. And I wonder if that is something to do with the fact that this has been fully matured in that red wine cask. You know,
I think so.
That's gained that age, almost that feel of age, so much sort of more comprehensively.
And the white oak in Australia that Penfold Grange uses is essentially the same species as the American white oak. So it's high in natural vanilla again and low in natural tannin. Pardon me. Whereas choking, a lot of the, if we used a European wine, then we would be high in natural tannin, and I think that would sway it for me.
Now that's
Well,
easy.
just had a big thumbs up from the Wilkinsons there. Sorry, Dennis, go for it.
That's easy sipping. There's no harshness about it at all for being such a young whiskey.
Yeah.
It's smooth, rich. I like that. Chris, where do you source your barley from?
So we actually, this is another interesting question, Dennis, because I've been associated with this brewery. My previous business partners owned a brewery, and they produce the wash. Now they have traditionally used crisp maltings, and so we as a distillery we've followed suit and we've used crisp. Now, as we move to the new site, when we build our proper facility on site, we're going to become self-sufficient in wash production as well. But in the meantime, I've got to get a different local brewery to produce the wash for me. And I'm probably going to go down the same route of using crisp malt so we can keep it the same as this.
Yeah. Okay.
For some reason, my video just went off. I'll just get that back.
Albert, what are you thinking of this? If you don't mind me asking. Oh, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
Oh, it looks like we might have lost you.
I've got two screens here, so I lose my mouse. So I think, oh God, my video's gone, and then I can't find out where the mouse is on the two screens.
Is that working now?
Yeah.
Ah, good. I mean, I found the first one, which is the second one you tasted, really lovely. I've made notes actually. But that second one, the one we've just tasted now, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, really, really lovely.
Yeah. All right. Good. Good. Good to hear.
I think something funny's going on with man.
Yeah, I think you're cutting out a bit there, Albert.
Yeah.
Chris, is this an
About 50
STR
pence in
cask
the meter.
or?
It is not an STR cask. No. Who asked that question?
I asked Andy.
Andy. No. Interesting question, Andy. No, I used it raw. So first fill from our point of view. So it had Penfold Grange. It actually came from Australia whole, which the ex-bourbon casks from America do not come whole. So this came whole, just with a plastic bung. Sorry, Garson, in the hole. and we first filled it. Now, the reason I say it's an interesting question is that we've done a collaboration on a brandy with a local vineyard, and and I thought, what cask will work for their will work for their brandy, and I decided, because these Penfold Grange casks are probably about 238 to 250 litres, something like that. Casks are always varying sizes as well, by the way. Because they're made out of wood, they're not exact at all. So I had one of our Penfold Grange casks brought down to 200 litres and STR'd specifically for this collaboration with this local vineyard. And I'm pointing behind me. We've got a tiny sample in the kitchen of the spirit that's only had 4 months in this cask, and it is stunning. So yeah, this is my first experiment with STRing.
So when it comes to like casks, I really struggle with sherry these days and stuff like that.
Yep.
Because I find it just basically overpowers. To me, it overpowers the whiskey, and STR and sort of red wine cask is very hit and miss.
Yeah,
this one's a massive hit. That is absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
Which is annoying because I like the first one. I like the second one more than the first one, and now I like the third one more than the second one. So yeah, that's amazingly good, I've got to say. Very different to an SCR cask. Very different to every other red wine cask I've had. Maybe I've not been drinking enough. Maybe I've been maybe I've not been drinking enough red wine casks to sort of like get a good sample set. But really nice. So easy to drink as well, and so much sort of fruity flavors in there.
I absolutely love this. I probably shouldn't. Well, I love them all, to be honest. But this ex-red wine, I am so chuffed with.
Yeah, I think the thing with the red wine casks are they're diverse, and if you want to see the difference, I'm quite a big fan of Long Row Red, and all of those expressions are all over the place. I mean, there's definitely the DNA there, if you want to call it that, but they are all over the place.
I think when I've talked to a few indie bottlers around the use of their red wine casks, one of the things that comes out is that invariably what they say is that it's extremely easy to cock it up, to actually overcook the spirit in red wine casks and just get it overpowered. And so, I mean, I think with this one, you've picked the exact right time to go with it. But I'm just curious whether are you keeping some back and maturing it beyond the 3 years? I presume you are. I'll be curious to find out, you know, what your view is, whether or not you're monitoring this a bit closer, having to open the cask a little bit more.
No, well, look out, my filming video's gone again. So no, Carl, leaving it.
All right, you're leaving it.
So they were filled at different times. So I happen to know off the top of my head that the others haven't hit 3 years yet. So
right, all right. But are you gonna experiment? I take it you're gonna have to monitor them a little bit closer, or is that your view? Have you kind of got the same sort of impression about using red wine?
Do you know? Well, so I think there's an interesting thing here, Carl. And when I do whiskey shows and things like that, and try and explain to people what I think is going on, and it is this European and American oak thing. And what I say to people is the way to experiment yourself with this is just go to a supermarket and buy 2 bottles of red wine. Buy a Spanish Rioja that's oak aged, and that'll be in a European oak, and it'll be high in tannin. And buy an American red wine that's oak aged from Napa Valley or whatever, and it'll be in American oak, and it'll be high in natural vanilla. And you taste the two side by side. The Rioja will completely dry your mouth out. The tannins will get in there, and the Napa Valley Californian wine will be lovely and light, and easy drinking. It feels like it's sort of hydrating you, sort of thing, and that's the big difference. And I think if you see quite a few companies will go for the European oak, and then if you leave that too long, you're pulling all that tannin out, and you're getting the tannin from the wine effect in the first place anyway. To me, that's too much. And I've, when I started, and there are a number, and when I started and put our business case together, the only place I could get casks from was Speyside Cooperage in the UK. And I was fortunate enough to get a bit of a grant, and the grant people wanted 3 quotes for everything that we were procuring and getting a bit of support from the grant people for. So I thought, well, casks are an asset. I'll get some grant money on those. And it took me forever to convince them that there was only one supplier in the UK. And they were saying to me, well, there's this garden centre, they've got some barrels. I said, they're in halves. It's like, what are you talking about? So there was only Speyside Cooperage that could supply us. Now, since then, there's a number of other cooperages have come up, and so there's some in England now as well. And people keep saying to me, oh, try, you're small, try this, try that, try the other. And again, it's this, it isn't broken. It isn't broken. And I don't necessarily want to produce something that's wacky and just suits a small part of the market. And I don't like, all 3 that we've sampled this evening, I haven't done the thumbs up or thumbs down or thumbs across, but I would have put a thumbs up to all of them so far, because not only because I've made them, but I'm thoroughly enjoying them. And so if I had one here that was high in tannin, I know personally I wouldn't like that. Now, some of you guys might absolutely love it, but I wouldn't, and then I would think, oh, why have I got this in the range? And so that's sort of me,
Well, I think you've immediately got some questions around what's the price of this bottle?
I think this is $59.95 again.
That's pretty reasonable, that is.
And again,
if I do say so myself as a Geordie stingy git. Anybody got any further comments on the red wine cask? Anybody not enjoying it? Because I think so far, everybody's.
I'm enjoying it, Carl. I just wish I could have tried it at the cask strength. I think what this is a really nice whiskey. I really like it. I think the cask strength version would have been absolutely stunning. Sorry.
It is, Dave.
To be fair, Dave, you're probably saying exactly what most of us are probably thinking, that I wish we could have tried the cask strength version as well. So maybe, Chris, when you come to the 3 years or so when you want to bottle the next one, maybe we should have a conversation about 40 bottles disappearing to Newas.
Do you do that sort of thing?
I don't. I tend to avoid taking that on, to be honest. But I would make an exception if I knew that there was going to be, you know, the interest in 40 bottles, and you can provide 40 bottles, and we can just make it easy. Because I'm a bit like you, I don't want to make my life difficult or complicated.
No, that's the thing, isn't it?
But for that, I would make an exception. I'd make it work if there was, because that was lovely. And I'd love to try it at cask strength.
You put me down for a bottle, Carl.
Yeah, me too. So what you're saying, Carl, is you wouldn't normally do it, but you bloody will for this.
Well, there's been a few that actually I would have. If you remember when we first tried, was it Milk and Honey did a pomegranate cask with us in lockdown when we first did our first virtual tasting with Milk and Honey. That pomegranate that we had was just stunning. So I would have done it for that, or something similar. So there's a bunch of bottles that I think have kind of caught my view, and this I think is a no-brainer as well.
Thank you.
Arrange a road trip, Carl, on bottling day.
Aye.
And then that 40 bottles will just disappear in the back of the car.
Absolutely.
You know that we've got a van and we don't live too far away.
Don't go saying that. I'm just trying to convince HMRC that I'm totally secure.
I'll be there with my wheelbarrow, don't worry.
Actually, that was one of my questions that I was going to ask you, Chris. When you move to your new premises and things, are you thinking about jumping on the bandwagon of having some form of visitor centre or some way of more formally handling visitors?
So yes, we've got a few things in the pipeline, Carl. So initially in the container built distillery, it'll be very, very low key. We will not have tours advertised on the website and things like that. But you know, for one or two individuals who think that who happen to be passing, you know, they'll probably be very welcome to pop in and say hello. But we've got to keep it low key to start with. Now the location, though, when we build the purpose-built one, I can see a great big platform because it's in a valley, it's on a hillside of a valley overlooking the Bourbon Mountains in mid Wales, and so I can see this great big balcony essentially in front of the distillery, which is part of the visitor center and the visitor experience. Now, you know, that's 2 or 3 years away, hopefully. But in the shorter term, so my new business partner, Mike, as I mentioned earlier, he owns this football club, and the stadium for the football club is only about 2 miles from my house here where I'm sitting. And we already have the Henstone Distillery suite there. So that's another option for us to use that facility to do tastings. And in fact, we're sort of planning to do quite a big launch party that when we've moved to the new facility, we'll make it very clear to everybody locally and quite wide from far away as well that we have moved and we are now an independent company. We're not associated with that previous one. And here's a party to celebrate that. And that's at a place called The Venue, which is, it's a big room. We can make, you know, a lot of use of that as well. So we've got quite a few options. In fact, at The Venue, we may introduce a little pop-up shop as well and have that facility available for people who are living locally as well.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm wondering whether it's even worthwhile doing the thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down for the red wine.
You've got to do it.
I don't think anybody's actually expressed any sort of
two thumbs.
So yeah, okay, we'll do this. Come on, let's do it. Becca's that pleased, eh? Right, okay. Bloody hell. Even Garson's got, hey, you see, Garson's he's had 4 thumbs up, I think, so far. Chris, you've got to be doing something.
I'm humbled, I tell you.
Listen, Carl, we've only had 3 drams. There's 3 thumbs up.
Oh yeah, 3 thumbs up, sorry, yes. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Because I'm guessing, Chris, that the next one is going to be the corn dog.
No.
The old dog. No. Oh my God. Right, okay.
No, we're going.
Peated.
We're going peated.
Right, so that is the tick.
So can I ask, Chris, what did you charge for the cask strengths?
Oh, I can't remember now. I mean, I think because we did it, so it wasn't an RRP sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but I would guess it would be in the sort of like 80 quid region, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is, whoop, I can never get my this bit right. This is the one now that you're going to sample. So it's a peated finish essentially. So a little bit of background again, I guess. I've never been a huge fan of peated whiskey, although, you know, I have occasionally liked to sample one or two, and I thought it would be nice to have a peated whiskey in the portfolio. So number one, I knew we couldn't use peated malted barley. And the reason for that, because we're co-located with a brewery making the wash, there'd be a danger that all of the beers would be tainted by that peat nose and flavor. And so we knew we couldn't do that. So I thought then the other option was to get hold of ex-islay casks. And that's what I did. So this one spent 3 years in ex-bourbon again, and then has spent about a year in an ex-islay cask. And this goes back to what I said earlier. So the ex-islay cask is the butt is painted white, and they're painted white to prevent us seeing where it originated from, apparently. I think some of this is a bit of baloney, to be honest, but yeah, we're not allowed to know which specific distillery they came from, but it's a quarter cask, and I believe some of you may know more about this, but I believe Lafroig is one of the only ones that actually matures in quarter casks.
Is there any chance that the quarter cask might have been made up as a quarter cask? Because I'm not getting any Lafroig kind of notes.
Okay,
on this.
there is that potential, Carl, but you know, I'm only surmising. Yeah.
Because I automatically assumed it would be Kalila, because it kind of has that bit of a Kalila feel to it for me.
Yeah.
Which bottle is it in, Carl?
Yeah, so this one's the tick.
The tick, right.
It should be the last one with a symbol on it.
Yeah,
it is.
That's a wee bit unfair putting a tick on a sample bottle. I never got a lot of ticks in my exam results, so I'm not really familiar with a tick.
I'm just familiar with thumbs up now, Carson.
It's a lopsided V, Carson. Just think of it like that. So I've actually had quite a few of ex-islay cask whiskies from independent bottlers. And I do like peated whiskey, but I always find these really interesting because it kind of removes the peat and leaves the ash.
Yeah.
Whenever there is one, and it's always a very unique sort of like thing. Which I think is really nice, is to kind of get away from cover your ears, Carl, to get away from peat, and actually just sort of like emphasize smoke rather than peat. So on the nose, for me, that smells very much like the first one, but this seems obvious, but like it's been kept in an ex-islay cask, you know, so subtle, very, very subtle.
Again, actually, the word balanced comes to mind. I know it's not, it's an obvious one to just kick out there for anybody to say, oh, this is a balanced dram, but I genuinely think you've kind of got the right, like you say, you can definitely pick out the profile of Henstone from it based on what we've had so far.
Yeah.
But there's a nice little hint. It's more than a hint, but it's there. The smoke or peat, whatever. But for me, it is that I still find that there's a bit of peat in there as well as. But when you mentioned ash, Andy, I definitely kind of followed you on the ash. There is an element of ash in this for me. But yeah, what's everybody else thinking?
I'm with you. I think it's some Koala. Definitely got a Koala feel about it.
I can't pick out any Lefroy. I mean, Lefroy is so, for me anyway, it's so distinctive. I just can't see how this could be Lefroy.
So I'm going to disagree with you there, Carl.
No, I totally disagree. I think this could easily be a Lefroy cask.
Who said that?
I did.
Excellent, Dave. Solidarity.
So I think what you're interpreting is as Kalila tastes is actually some of the notes you get from the distillate that Chris is making himself. I don't think it's coming from the cask.
If you think of Lefroy as like germaline, like sort of smell, that iodine. Yeah. This has like a waft of elastoplast that's been on your scuffed knee for 3 days that you've taken off.
Yeah. Delightful.
So you're still getting that sort of like medicinal note, but it's really, really distant.
Mm.
But it's still very iodine, which I've not had. I think I'm going to be honest, I think most of the sort of ex-islay cask ones that I've had have probably been Kalila ones, not Lefroy. I could be wrong though. You know, they don't disclose that. So
exactly, yeah.
It could be any damn thing.
It's nice though. It's a really nice subtle twist on the other one.
Behind the peat, I get a lot of green apples and also that's this sort of like Haribo gummy bear thing, which I got the first one as well. It's quite interesting.
Is Steve Laidler actually enjoying this? That's one question that we need answered to.
He's been remarkably quiet, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I'm already, as you know, Chris, I'm already a bit of a fanboy, so I've deliberately not said anything. Given that we have features in several photos in several different locations, so I didn't think I was coming in from a neutral kind of point of view. I've been a big proponent of Henstone for a long time, and Dawson will be sick of me going on about it. It's fair to say this one is my fourth favourite of the evening. That's more. That's more because of the kind of peated element. I still think it's good, to be fair. It's not. What I don't like about peat is when it hits you in the face. I've said this a lot of times on these tastings. This one is balanced, so I'm quite happy to drink this. I just think that, you know, some of the earlier ones, especially I had the red wine one with Carl at Southport, probably less than a month ago now, and I thought that was exceptional. You know, 3 years in a day, it shouldn't be allowed, really, should it? But yeah,
no, it really shouldn't.
Yeah, and $59.95 or $55 with your 10% off, obviously. So, but yeah.
So clearly, Steve's on commission and he's been buying bottles. That's why he's been so quiet.
Do you know what? Do you know what? No, he's not on commission.
No, I mean, I met Chris initially through Exploring English Whiskey, and then which is a online group predominantly, or certainly for me this far north. And then we kind of, Chris has been at a couple of Southport festivals, and it's more, for me, and Dawson and Carl will be aware of my opinion, it's more than just about the whiskey. It's the way kind of Chris, I'll give you an example. There was a whiskey tasting on the English Whiskey group where Chris was supplying some of the whiskey, and Chris bought a ticket to attend it, and he was supplying some of the whiskey, and I thought that spoke volumes at the time about kind of how Chris is and how he does things. So I've been to the distillery a couple of times, and I went with my wife, and my wife now gets the people element, because we went upstairs to where Hilda was, and I think it's Flo, your daughter, Chris?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, she's labeling bottles that are going out the next day. I was a bit concerned because she was quite heavily pregnant, but Chris didn't seem concerned. And so my wife's chatting away with her, and it was just, you know, the containers he mentioned, I think I bought a bottle of the Ex Oloroso in one of those containers, if I remember rightly, where we spirited away.
Yeah, you did. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's more about the juice. It's about the people as well. So although this is 4th of 4, I'm still a big proponent of Henstone.
It doesn't come through though, Steve. You need to up your game a little
No,
and
yeah,
you know, be a bit more positive.
I need the beanie hat, don't I? That's what I need, the beanie hat on with the Henstone across.
No, I mean to be fair, and actually, I would reiterate what Steve said. Chris, you impressed the heck out of me in terms of your enthusiasm and you know what you want to try and achieve and you kind of your future view of where you want to go with Henstone. So it was just great to have this opportunity to kind of share what you're doing with a broader sort of audience. And if you ever fancied a trip up to Newcastle, maybe to the festival in September or something, just just give me a shout. We need. Oh my God, there's Steve doing his fanboy stuff. So yeah, it's great stuff. So what's anybody else want to comment on the peated ex-peated? John,
I want to know what John thinks because I know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, John.
Other than the fact you think it's Ginny on the nose, which I agree.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way it went straight back to the first one, where the first whiff I got was gin. And I mean, I'm not a massive peat fan anyway, so like Steve, this is my 4th favorite. So, but I must admit, after the first one, I wasn't really expecting it to get better. But the Oloroso, although I still got a little bit of the gin, which speaks volumes for the new make, I suppose, because that still came through. But I mean, that red wine is a fantastic whiskey, but it's just number 4 is peat and gin for me. So, and I don't like either. So
you're still finding it peaty, yeah?
Oh yeah, I can pick up the peat on it.
Oh yeah, me too. But I think it's such a low level. I'm surprised.
Well, the thing is, for me, I do like peat, but I like Highland peat. I don't like Islay peat.
Yeah.
There's a massive difference. So if you give me a Springbank or say a Ruard Moor peated Glenturret, then I'll quite happily drink those. But if you give me an Islay, it's a different ballpark, and I'm not a fan.
Not a fan of seaweed, eh?
Can we get him banned?
So all I've got to do is go to a different area of Scotland and get the cask from there then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, pretty much. Go to Glenturret or maybe pop over to Arran, get one from Lag.
Ardmore.
Yeah, Ardmore.
Be a good option.
Yeah.
Ardmore's awesome, generally. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Leggish on Tobermory.
Yeah.
Another good option.
Yeah. So, is it even worth doing again? Well, I'm already guessing from the feedback so far who's going to be potentially thumbs down on this. Well, shall we do it? Shall we give it a go? Who's thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down? You're sideways.
Oh, come on, that's not too bad.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, this is going to sound incredibly obvious, but it's like a peated version of the first.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing at all. It's like you could put them side by side and say that this is Henstone's profile with ex-bourbon, and this one's got like a peated edge to it, which is still very nice.
Yeah. Chris, who's in the disco room. What's your view on this, Chris? That's you, yes, we're talking about you, Chris, yes.
I'm not in the disco room, are
you kind of look a little like you're in the disco room.
You keep going purple, Chris. You keep going purple.
Sorry.
It's because he's watching the telly.
No, I'm not watching the telly. My partner's watching the telly. So here.
Hello.
It's too ashy for me. Yeah. I like a peated that's more soft, like a rassy.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Have you liked the others though? I seem to remember, I think you've had thumbs up on all of them so far. Is it that profile that you really like from Henstone?
All of them so far. Okay, yeah, I would go 3, 2, 1. So back to front.
Yeah.
The red wine, then Oloroso, and then the standard. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised that as it stands, the red wine. I'm not going to say it actually. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop
there, Carl.
Grand. All right. Cheers, Chris. Yeah, actually, I noticed as well. Steve just kind of did a secret little message to me and said, "Hey, Gavin did a thumbs down there. We need to hear from Gavin. Why did he put a thumbs down, Gavin? Come on, Gavin.
Wait on. Right, so it was ginny. It was too ginny for me. I think we've all had my conversations about milk and honey. The first time round with milk and honey, gin just not my thing. There was a little bit too much of the gin on that one for me. But it's one of those things that any tasting is great because you get to mix these things up and see different stuff. So first one and last one, lower end. Top two in the middle, top banana. So we'll see what the last one brings, and all good.
Well, I suspect, Gavin, that the last one is going to be so out there compared with what we've had so far. That's my guess.
Can we just point out that was your first pick?
Well, yes, I presumed we were going to go with the curveball right at the beginning. That was my kind of assumption. So I stand corrected, definitely. I'm actually really curious to know what this one's like.
So let me give this one a little bit of an introduction before, well, as you pour it. So this is obviously the last pour you have. When I was putting our business plan together in 2016, I was thinking we weren't going to make gin at the time. I was thinking, Jesus, 3 years before we have any income. And I had this little thing going on in my head that said to me, Chris, I'm sure bourbon can be released after 2 years. I had no idea that we couldn't call it bourbon or anything like that at the time. And so I thought, well, bloody hell, that's a good idea, Chris. You know how your subconscious works. I thought we'll make a bourbon. And so essentially what you've got in your fifth sample is what we call, is it focused Old Dog corn liquor. So it's my Shropshire bourbon equivalent. So by the time it had matured a little bit, so you can see the color in this bottle. By the time it had matured a little bit, I realized I couldn't call it a bourbon. So we sat down and we thought, what can we call it? Now the mash bill, so I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but the mash bill is the ingredients that go into that beer that we then distill to produce the whiskey. The mash bill for this is 68% corn, 16% wheat, 16% barley. And then it's matured in new American oak. So the two differences between it and a bourbon are essentially, one, it's not made in America. And two, it's this is sweet mash rather than sour mash. Now the reason we didn't, so sour mash means essentially that the beer you produce before you distill it, you make it go like vinegar. And that's essentially what they do in America. They force it to go like vinegar and then call it sour mash. Because again, we're associated with a brewery, we couldn't afford to do that in case that had an impact on the beers that the distillery was producing. So we went sweet mash, and that's what this is. This is generally, I think this batch that we've got is probably about, it's a bit short of 2 years maturation. It's actually the lightest ABV we've had. This is 41.5%. And yeah, it makes a mean Negroni and a mean Manhattan.
It's very nice on its own as well.
I didn't mean Negroni, I meant old-fashioned, actually. Old-fashioned and Manhattan. Yeah. So there you go. radically different to the
I have a
others.
small-
I think the only other corn whiskey I've had is it Mellow Corn? Is the famous one with the screw top, which is like
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
and it is kind of like that.
Mm.
I do like it. It's very, very nice.
Did you find it was an expensive mash? Because I know corn's a lot more expensive than barley.
Yeah, it's in the quantities we're buying it, the differential's not huge. We do have to add oat husk as well. So when oats are processed, husk is normally just used as a fertilizer. It's thrown away, and but we got hold of some of that, and by adding that to the mash, it stops it going too gloopy. Otherwise, you've got this problem of this sort of stuck porridge trying to get it out of the mash tun, and so that worked. But it's there and thereabouts. It's not a huge difference, to be honest.
So why did you actually go for the wheat percentage?
I did tons of analysis on. So I said this earlier about how I analyze everything to within an inch of its life. So I did tons of analysis of all of the bourbon brands. So this is back in 2006, late 2016, John. So at the time, Christ, we're talking 7 years ago now, aren't we? So at the time, I did as much analysis as I could. I think I've still got the spreadsheet of all these bourbon brands and what mixes they had of the grain mix in their blends, in their mash bills, sorry. And I looked at all of those and sort of thought, and I tasted not all of them by any means, but I tasted one or two, and which ones do I like and what were their mash bills, and sort of based it on that, really. And we also, because we buy through, or we were buying through Crisp in the previous association with the brewery, the people from Crisp had been particularly helpful as well in terms of what will actually work in the mash tun.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of, because I've tried. I'm a big fan of bourbon, and I've tried some wheat whiskies.
Yep.
With an E, and I'm not really a massive fan of those. I prefer like a corn and barley mash, and I must admit I prefer a sour mash to a sweet mash.
To sweet, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it hasn't got the nose of a bourbon anyway, so you couldn't really have gotten away with calling it bourbon, because it's not only from the makeup, it just doesn't smell like one.
No.
But it is quite a nice whiskey, actually. I'm a fan of this one.
So I'll let you into a secret now. Not many people know this, but so products evolve as well over time, and so I thought, well, because this is matured in New American oak, so the New American oak barrels are more expensive than ex-bourbon. And I was thinking, hold on, so actually this, and so the RRP on this one, by the way, I don't know if anybody's asked, but the ABV is 41.5%. I just saw a question there.
Yeah.
And the RRP on this one, I think 37.95, because it's matured for less time. So then that's what we factored in. But it's it's interesting, that whole thing around the overall mash bill as well, but the product evolution though. So I was putting this stuff into New American oak and thinking, well, okay, so we bring it out after sort of 18. Initially, I think the very first batch was 8 months, and we got it to market. And then I used the same barrel for the second lot. Sorry, second batch, I should say, shouldn't I? And I wasn't particularly pleased with the second batch after 12 months, 14 months, or whatever it was. And so this is how products evolve, So I thought, okay, so what I'm doing now is Old Dog Corn liquor, which you've just had, goes into New American oak, and it's having between 12 to 24 months of maturation. And then the second fill of the cask is the same new make, so it's the Old Dog Corn Liquor new make, but that's then having over 3 years, and it's gonna. You will see it later this year. It'll be Old Dog Corn Whiskey, because
right, okay.
having over 3 years in wood, we can call it a whiskey, right?
Have
And
you?
it'll be a grain. It won't be a single malt or anything like that. It'll be a grain, but we can call it a whiskey. And so that's coming out later this year from one of the first second fills.
Right. Have you thought about experimenting with the char levels?
So yes and no. You see, again, because we're small and don't have huge volume, it can be a very expensive thing to sort of tweak and try and tweak. As we go forward, yes, I will, John, but I have so far gone with medium char on everything, because I thought that was a good baseline to start with. I don't think I mentioned when I said about us setting up the new distillery, one of the initial objectives is to quadruple our whiskey production capacity. We can easily do that. And that's one of the first things we're going to do. So, and then, John, it allows us to sort of say, actually, let's get one with high char and let's get one with low, and leave the three together for 12 months and just see what we think of the output. We haven't been able to do that thus far.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But it's definitely on the agenda. And if you want to help taste, then you're more than welcome.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sign me up straight away. So another thing, obviously, this was initially a revenue maker, if you like. So are you going to continue on, and is it going to be a staple of your core range, if you like?
Yes, I would dearly love it to be, John, because I think it's one of those. It's hugely different in the market. And when you bring something to the market that's hugely different, it's very, very difficult to sell it. So, you know, so it has its advantages and it has some quite serious disadvantages as well. But what we've found is that bartenders who know their stuff go for it like there's no tomorrow, you know. We've been to the Northern Restaurant and Bar Fair a couple of times in Manchester. It's a big thing in March. And people have come zooming to us, bartenders from the Manchester area, saying, "You're the ones who make Old Dog Corn liquor, aren't you?" You think, whoa, have you heard of it? It's the best old-fashioned ever. You know, and it's really nice to hear that sort of stuff. It doesn't necessarily result in sales, but, you know, it's one of those things that I think if we persevere, it'll bring results at the end. And sometimes you've just got to persevere.
Not put that in a cocktail.
Yeah. Another thing that I would be really interested in trying is it at cask strength, because like most of pretty much all of the whiskies that I drink nowadays are a single cask strength. So trying that at cask strength would be very interesting.
Yeah, interesting, because I mean, because the Old Dog Corn whiskey, which we are going to introduce later this year, another interesting thing, when I come to bottle any of our products, we have this little taste test, and it goes right back to the very first product we released, where we had predefined what the ABV was going to be, and the labels were just about to be produced, and I was trying to get it to that ABV and I didn't like it, and so actually stopped label production. That was the very, very first product. And so since then, every product we release, we do a little taste test, just a small, 3 or 4 of us. And I set it all up so I know what's in each cup and nobody else does. And they go, essentially from high to low or low to high. And 9 times out of 10, we all agree. But it's interesting, when we don't. And it's an interesting thing to do. So at the moment, we're going to have Old Dog Corn whiskey this year, but we do not know the ABV yet.
You can always get the labels pre-printed and leave the ABV.
I know we can. I know, and we've actually done that, because we're going to release a cask strength version of our whiskey soon as well, and we have the labels, and they do have I can show you. So on this one, I don't know if it's going to focus, but here is the ABV. And so we've left that blank on this particular one. But the other problem is on the back, you're supposed to have, I can never get my bloody fingers in the right place on this. You're supposed to have this bottle that then gives the units. You have to leave that blank as well. And then you've got to you've got to then have somebody write the units on the back and make sure you put the decimal place in the right place.
Yeah.
So
well, you can always employ your heavily pregnant daughter to do that, though.
Well, she's not pregnant any longer, so she's coming back to work soon.
As is her child.
Sorry?
As is her child, probably.
Absolutely. By the way, what I haven't mentioned, so I can pick up any of these bottles. If you do buy one of our bottles of whiskey, so front labels always the same shape, but they describe different things. On the back label, generally, you know, it's similar words and all that sort of stuff. But this little label at the bottom here is actually handwritten. Okay, and this describes then the batch number, the bottle number in that batch, and the date of production. And then if you, as I mentioned earlier, that if you head over to our website, I've created this page that then describes each of the releases. So the batch number and the date, and it gives you everything to do with that particular bottle of whiskey. And by the way, as well, in the early days, we used to hold back, you know, bottles 1 to 6 and all that sort of stuff and think they would be valuable. Now, when we release something, the first person in gets bottle number 1.
Woohoo!
Yep.
So actually, the Wilkies have already started putting in what their view is in terms of the order of their favorite to the lesser favorite. If you want to just do that in there, but before everybody does it, shall we do the old thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down on this one? I'm curious to see what everybody thinks.
I'm curious as well. I can see a down from Steve.
You were down.
2 up from John. That wow. Interesting. Quite a mix there. Quite a mix.
So Steve was wavering a bit there. Becca and Ollie are definitely. Dave. So I knew this would be a room splitter, I have to say.
And then Gavin, who gave us a down earlier on something, has given us a thumbs up on this one.
Yeah.
Gavin, I want you to take some photographs of it, mate.
For me, it's just that perfume and floral notes are too much. It's like it's gone too far for me, I think.
Interesting.
But then also, I'm really not a fan of bourbon because I often smell perfume and aftershave in like rye and things that aren't basically barley or wheat, pretty much. And I don't like that note. But I say that, but because I think of the low ABV, whilst I'm not keen on it, I find it really easy to drink and it's still interesting. It's just not my favourite one. I think, do you know what it is number 3, the red wine, the ex-red wine cask is such an absolute blinder that it's probably ruined me for all of the other ones.
I agree, Becca. I'm struggling to get past 3.
Yeah.
For me, it's so sweet compared to the other ones. That's why, and Chris will have known it would have been my most unfavorite. We've had this conversation a couple of times already. It's so sweet and it's so different. I really struggle with it.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just though because sometimes I wonder whether it's because we're just not used to like bourbon and sort of other grain spirits, shall we say, rather than whiskey. But I don't know. I feel like we maybe an extensive alternative alternate malt night, Carl.
It could be that aspect of it, because I mean, Steve's not a massive grain fan either. Where I love grain.
We don't drink that much. We drink more grain whiskey now since Nee was than before. Put it that way. We've been converted to a few.
Yeah.
Can I just pick up on a point that Becca's just made there? I think all of these drams have been approachable at the ABVs that have been presented at. And I was just thinking, I really enjoyed every single dram, but I'm thinking it's the kind of dram I'd love to see in a gantry in a bar that I might not always go to, like not like a whiskey bar, but I've got a train station just up the road from me, and sometimes I rush up there and I think I'm just going to be on time, but I've got 10 minutes to kill. And I was just thinking earlier on that if I had 10 minutes to kill and this was on a gantry in the Railway Tavern, I would go in and I would buy it. Any one of those drams, I would go in, have a quick dram and then go. And what I said earlier on about it being reminiscent of these old blends, it feels to me like a gantry staple. And if that makes sense, it's a, I don't want to say ordinary because ordinary is not the right word. It's a great approachable whiskey. Dennis said the summer sipper. It's definitely a drinking whiskey. You know, all of these are drinking whiskies. You could have more than one dram and you would get on with it, I think.
Mm.
I'm conflicted. The reason I said that, Chris, and Steve and Carol bear me out in this, because I've been a detractor of Henstone, because the first Henstone I had was my last one, and it was the Southport. It was the Southport one, and I thought it was, you know, people.
Did I pour it for you, Garson?
No, you did not. And in fact, we stood outside your tasting, and Steve tried to drag me in, and I think I'd just done Glen Scotia. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to have a break. I don't fancy a gin. And you know, I say that because, you know, I'm trying to be honest. You know, I wasn't a fan.
That's just perfectly okay.
Yeah. Tonight has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed these drams in context. The red wine one, I'd love to put in a blind tasting. Red one, I'll definitely buy to do that, to put it in a tasting, to maybe just show people that there's something else out there, and to surprise people who maybe are like me, saying, "Well, no, I'm not really a fan," because I know a couple of people have had that Southport one and they did enjoy it. For me, there's so many drams out there that sometimes when you have a first impression, you tend to ignore that for a while.
I totally understand that, Carson. Totally understand it. I've done it myself.
But I think tonight, I was just thinking that maybe I would love to try it at 48%. I'd love to try it at 50. Cask strength, when I know what John was saying, and I know what other people are saying, I love a cask strength dram. I like to be able to make more mind of where I want my dram to be so I can bring it down. But when I think about Henstone, I think about that cask strength one I had, and then I think about these. I have thoroughly enjoyed these. And there has been time between the Southport one and now, and I have found these old blends. I'm conflicted because I really do enjoy it, but I'm thinking, where's the place for this? Am I going to spend 60 quid on a bottle? This is the problem. Am I going to spend 60 quid, 70, 80 quid on a bottle of 46% Henstone? I'm going to say probably not, because there's so many whiskies out there. Trademark X, James Eady Trademark X is 35 quid. It's a great blend. And it's in this area, you know, in terms of, it's quite a short finish. The Henstone, these ones you presented tonight, I'd like a bit more finish, and then I would be more along the lines of, yeah, it's better balanced for me. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Yeah.
So, like,
however, I've spent.
When you go to Chris,
2 hours with you now, so surely you could buy one.
No, absolutely. I would. You know what? I've thoroughly enjoyed them. I've put together tastings, and I've asked people to come and do tastings at Falkirk,